Okay, now we're ready to put the sections together. Now this next part is they're eighths. Their sections are eighths. There's your square sections and your triangle sections. Okay, so we're going to sew them together. We've already pressed the seams opposite, so all I have to do is flip it, the square on top. You can see that the seams butt against each other, just like that. Okay, and now I'm going to check, and if I had a good seam, I have a good 1/4 inch seam, everything's going to match. So you see this matches up here. See, everything's cut. All these templates are cut so that everything fits together. You don't have any corners that stick up or stick out that you have to cut off. So I can see that these match. I can see my center seam matches, and I'm going to put a pin right here in front of the seam. Again, I'm going to push these together so that they fit nice and tight, and I'm going to pin it. I like these little 4mm pins. They're very sharp. They're for sale on my website. In case you want a good set of pins, they're great for batiks if you do stuff with batiks. I'm also going to add a pin right here at the end, and I'll add a pin here in the middle, just so the fabric doesn't travel when I'm sewing. A lot of times, if your fabric's a little stretchy, it might travel, so it doesn't hurt to add a few pins. Okay, so now I'm ready to sew. I'm going to sew from top down. It really doesn't make any difference, but I do like to sew from the top down to the kite shape. Remember to take your pins out as you're sewing. I'm going to pick up my next square section. Again, I'm going to fold over my square on top of the kite section, push my seams together, just like this, and put a pin in the front part of the seam. Put a pin in right here. This is where most people have problems when things don't match, is they have fabric. The edges aren't even, so you always check to make sure your fabric's even. You don't see the bottom fabric in the top, and you don't see the top fabric in the bottom. And I'm going to put a pin at the end, and sew. Now, I always sew slower over seams because the fabric has a tendency, or the machine, the feed dogs have a tendency to push the fabric away from the needle. So if you sew slower and use your hand to guide it, it'll stay straight along the seam allowance. Okay, so I've sewn the seam. Now you can see everything matches perfectly. And this I'm going to press again to the square. And you're going to find out how important it is to press to the square. After I do finger press these sections, I am going to take them to the iron and give them a good pressing. Okay, again, I'm going to take the square, fold it over onto the kite section, match the seams, pin it, now if you find that some of your sections aren't matching very well, you need to stop at this point and fix them, because if you don't fix them early, then when you go to put the rest of them together, your block's not going to end up being square. So at this point, if you find that one of your sections is sticking way out over here, or it's sticking out down here, stop and check your seam, because if your seam's too big or too small, then you better make your adjustments now before it's too late. It's better to make adjustments in the beginning as you're piecing your sections rather than try and fix it at the end. If it was a section that I could measure, then I use a measure-as-you-go system where I sew a section together, I measure it to make sure that it's the right measurement. But with this, it's such an odd shape, we can't really measure it. Okay, again, seams match perfectly. I'm going to press it, finger press it to the square and put it back in place. Also going to check to make sure this is straight. This seam right here is straight. So that one needs to be straight too. If it's sticking out too much, then you have to make an adjustment. And then I'm going to pick up my last square, flip it, and repeat. Okay. Now remember, if you have any questions, I know since this isn't live, it's hard to ask questions while you're sewing, but if you do want to ask questions, feel free to email me or text me, however you want to contact me, use Messenger, whatever you want to do to contact me, do that, and feel free to ask any kind of questions you want. There's no such thing as a dumb question, so I want you to feel comfortable sewing this block together. And the more comfortable you feel sewing this block together, the better more fun it's going to be, especially when we start fussy cutting. Okay. Now, if these seams didn't match, of course, I would stop and fix them. Depends on how much of a perfectionist you are. I tend to be a perfectionist, so I would stop and fix them if I had to. Okay, so now I've done all my squares. Get the last square out. Finger press it to the square. Okay. Now I've got all my square sections done, and now I have to do my triangle sections. And you're just going to basically do the same thing. You're going to flip the triangle section over onto the kite section. Check your seams right here. Push them so that they fit snugly together. Put a pin in the front. Put a pin at the bottom. And put a pin in the middle. And now I'm ready to sew. Pick up my next one, match the seams, and pin. Now this is one of those blocks, the more you do, the better you get at it. I've been making this block probably about 20 years, so I could probably piece it in my sleep. Okay, now again, you're going to press towards the triangle. Finger press towards the triangle. Okay, I'm going to pick up another triangle section. Kite shapes on the bottom. Okay, it's really windy outside today. Dead space, dead airspace. I'm not talking. Okay, press it towards the triangle, check the seam. Again, the seams match perfectly. And the reason I finger press is because I want to make sure that there aren't any pleats in it, and that they're nice and flat. Because if you take it to the iron right away, okay, fold over the triangle. If you take it to the iron right away before you finger press it, a lot of times you'll press a pleat into it. And if you finger press it first, then you'll know it's going to lay nice and flat. Okay, this is my last section. Ready to sew. Okay, I'm going to press my last two sections towards the triangle. And on this section, you wanted to make sure this is straight. You want it straight on both edges. You don't want anything sticking out, because if you have anything sticking out, that means that your 1/4 inch is off somewhere. Okay, put the triangle sections where they belong. The centers. Press towards the triangle. Okay, and now I'm ready to take it to the iron and give it a nice pressing. I'm going to press it very flat. I want it to be nice and flat. I don't add water yet. I'm just going to use a dry iron. And when I come back, I'm going to show you how to sew the sections together. Okay, so far we've pressed seams going in one direction. We're going to press in a different way when we start putting the sections together. So I'll be back.